Hello everyone, welcome to Kesra TV. This is Brenda Margret, and today on Marriage Diaries, we are privileged to have Mrs. Catherine Ranger speaking to us about marriage. Now, by the end of this broadcast, you will know the essential things to consider in marriage. Ma'am Catherine, you're most welcome.
Thank you. I am, besides being a Bazungu, I'm an American. We came to Uganda 4 years ago, actually at the end of this month, at the invitation of friends we knew who worked here, and they invited us to come and work at UCU. So that's why I'm here in Uganda. We really enjoy it. We're finding Ugandans to be very hospitable and lovely people. It very much feels like home. In addition to that, Richard and I have been married 47 years on the 24th of June. And 47 years, 13 shifts, how do I do this? 7 states, 2 foreign countries, the District of Columbia, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and 1 child.
Wow.
So that's a lot of living. One child is all the Lord allowed. Our son is now in his early 40s, and he is married, and we're here.
Okay,
he lives in the States.
Okay. How do we describe a successful Christian marriage?
That is a cross-cultural challenge, because how we understand marriage in the U.S. and how it is understood here, at least as I've been able to discern, are not quite the same thing. And I think, at least in contemporary American society, marriage is considered fairly romantic. You marry for love. You look for someone who shares your values. Richard and I are mother's world friends. They'd gone to the same university. Our fathers were both university graduates. We were in university, so we shared that. We were both Christian at the time, although he attended a Roman Catholic church and I was an Anglican or an Episcopalian in the U.S. So we look for some of those similar things, and along with other compatibilities, are we willing to do some of the same things together? Do you have things to talk about? and activities you're willing to share together? And we did. I sense that marriage here in Uganda is a bit different. Even in the States, we have what you would call your traditional marriage, where people come together and live together and present themselves as a couple without the benefit of clergy or a license from the state, and that's a choice. And that's not one Richard and I made. I was quite young when I was married. I was 6 weeks short of my 22nd birthday. And he had just finished law school, and we had finished his first year of working at a postgraduate school job. But here in Uganda, I sense it's a little bit different. I see people marrying for love, that love has something to do with it, romantic attraction, the physical attraction, but also similar values. People are, do we share the same faith, at least on a broad scale? And many of the people who introduced me to Uganda, who were students at Uganda Christian University some time ago, they just have one spouse. As far as anybody knows, several children, and so their married lives appear to be the same as ours in that regard. But then we have things like when a clergy person introduces himself, one of the things he will say is, I am the husband of just one wife, which in the U.S. is understood. Multiple wives are illegal in the U.S., at least. We don't call them wives, we call them affairs. And it's a betrayal. An affair is a betrayal. Now there are open marriages, and that is becoming common among a certain set of people. That is something a Ugandan might recognize, where that outside lover is and family is accepted by the first wife or the first spouse, but that's not a Christian marriage. So they are there. Our general social views of marriage probably aren't that much different. But a Christian marriage is between a man and a woman, and nobody else. At least in the States, our vows are for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, so long as we both shall live. That's the goal. Now, not everybody gets there. I understand that. Our parents did. Richard's parents were married for 65 years. 65 years before Richard's father died. My parents were married for 48 years before my father passed away. So we, on both sides, have, examples of people who were married, for a long time and stayed married. But we also have other examples in the family where it didn't work out. Siblings who've been divorced. That's life. But the ideal is the promise we made, and when things are kind of tough and we're frustrated, one of us is frustrated, then after you made a deal and you work through this problem. You don't necessarily live with abuse. That's not Christian. And abuse can be of any kind. It can be emotional. It can be physical. It can be, just verbal abuse that's both psychological and that gets it's broadly expansive, and it can also be sexual because sex is a mutual choice. So all of these things you negotiate, and you understand where each other is coming from, and you work together. And we certainly, in my life, my mother had a chronic illness, and my parents argued, but they always worked it out. And when I got married, my mother said, "I don't want to hear your problems. It's your marriage. It's not mine. You work with him when you have a disagreement."
Because you agree to be with him. You have to solve your issues only with him.
Right. I mean, the Bible says a man shall leave his mother, and a woman will leave her father, and now their new household. Now, that's not to say you cut out your extended family, but you are each other's first priority. And if either household is trying to interfere with your relationship that is otherwise healthy, then you have to be very careful how you navigate those. And in Uganda, you navigate them differently than you would here, because I know in Uganda, parents are more active in their kids' lives, even when they're adults in there, especially when there are grandchildren, because it's shared responsibility. And you may not live together anymore in the same village, but there are still expectations. And in the U.S., that works a bit differently. And so we try to recognize the new couple's autonomy and the fact that they need to learn to live together. And as much as your individual parents may know about how you are around the house, whether or not you're sloppy, whether or not you're neat whether or not you like to have the last word. All of that is what you work out with your spouse. Because your spouse should know some of that when you get married, right? I mean, you should have spent enough time getting to know each other, ideally, that some of those things aren't a surprise. Sometimes they are. And some things, when you're living together day to day, little habits are like, I was raised with I have 2 sisters, right? And so I wasn't raised with guys. And there's a lot of little things about the way men do hygiene that were new to me. And then I had a boy. And so, oh my goodness, I'm in the position my father was in, right? We used to tell him what to do, and now I have 2 males in my house, and so we had to negotiate certain things. And it's silly little things like the toilet seat, because in the U.S. we have the high toilets, and it's like everybody puts the lid down, and that way nobody complains about I'm the only one who touches it. But it's silly, but at the same time, it's a little habit that made that everybody felt was a fair rule, and it made life simple for all of us.
Yeah.
So, that's just one example of the things you navigate. And obviously, child rearing has its own complete set of rules and understandings and that sort of thing. So Christian marriage is between a man and a woman, ideally for life. You make those vows, you work on it.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. And there were moments, particularly my parents, because I grew up on the same street. I spent 21 years living on the same block, and with the same friends, going to the same schools. We weren't living in the same town as either one of my grandparents. They were far away, but we were on the same street. And then I married Richard, and we started shifting, which he had done growing up. And it was very hard on my parents, especially as we moved farther and farther away from where they were. But they adapted and accepted it, and didn't interfere. So that all wound up working in it.
That's it. For a Christian marriage to be successful, you have to stick to the vows. Number one, you have to stick to the vows you made with your partner. And if you're to solve issues, don't go to the elders every time. You have to sit as partners, spouses, and fix your issues. Hope that's clear now. Okay.
Start there.
Okay. Maybe Catherine, what are some of the things to consider for a healthy marriage?
In terms of choosing a partner?
Yeah. So we have seen a lot of people, they're living lives like, I don't know how to explain this, but just as you said in the past that you have to be mentally okay, right? Mm-hmm. So some people live in marriages where they are not comfortable with each other. So to be comfortable, what are the steps we have to consider?
Several things. I think, as Paul tells us, it's best not to be yoked to an unbeliever. So if you are seeking a marriage partner, then obviously a church community is where you start. So that you are encountering people who, if they are not what a Ugandan would describe as a born-again Christian, they are at least seeking and understand that. And you can learn more as you get to know people. But, that's one thing. And I work at Honors College here, and one of the things I'm always encouraging students, that once you graduate and you get a job and you're no longer in school and in a community where you get to know people, work is not your substitute family. That's not why you're there. And you should seek your, and you may encounter people at work who don't share your values, who don't share your religion, who share very little except a willingness to commit to the success of the enterprise you're in. And that's all fine. But if you want friends, if you're, far from home, church is where you look. Church is where you start. Find a community, and you may have to try different congregations and different worship expressions, so long as they're orthodox. Then it's fine. Find a place where you're comfortable, where you can meet people who are at least similar age. Different churches have draw different kinds of people, and then commit yourself. One of the things that made our shifts easier to bear is because we were committed to Jesus, and because we knew we needed a Christian community. A church was always, and a church, in our case, an Episcopal church, was always something we looked for when we looked for a new house, or a new place to stay, and as we were, and after we moved in, we'd shop, as it were. We'd visit different congregations on Sundays. Where were we welcome? What kind of people were they? What kinds of activities were they doing? Was there outreach? Were there a number of young people there? What were they about? Every community has a personality. Find one. And we found in each of those cases, they were as supportive of us. Once we made a commitment to the community, they made a commitment to us as well. And so, we had friends, we had accountability groups, we had Bible studies. We were invited to grow in service by volunteering at the church or by missions that the church was offering. Richard's first trip to Uganda was through one of our churches. It was a short-term mission that the rector invited him to go on. And, it was his introduction to a place he always wanted to come back to. At least we didn't know we were going to live here. So, that's something you look for. Find yourself a church community where you are welcome, where there are opportunities to serve, where there are opportunities to grow, but also that, and I've seen this from talking to my friends in Uganda, that, sometimes there's too much control. And I'm an American. I'm wary of external control. And you have to be careful that insistence on control, like a pastor who won't release a single woman to another congregation with a gentleman she's been seeing because I'm her pastor. You have to be careful about spiritual abuse, and you have to know how to recognize it. And I've heard multiple stories from, people who are well-educated, experienced, and it's like, this doesn't feel right. You're right. If it doesn't feel right, then you need to step back and take off your rose-colored glasses and be realistic about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and be honest about it with yourself. With someone you may be seeing about, is this normal? And seek an outside party's opinion if necessary. So there's that. The other thing I see from talking, and I've heard from talking to other Ugandans, is this whole issue of trust. That is a big challenge in this culture. And very early on in our stay, shortly after COVID lockdown ended and students returned to campus, we had a conversation with a young man who was just telling us his story. He was, I think, the second son of a second wife, so he was pretty far down the family financial totem pole. And totem pole is an American idiom. It has to do with an indigenous culture, but the bottom, the farther down you are from the top, the less status you have. and the less influence and the less you get. The fewer resources you're entitled to. Anyways, he wasn't expecting much, and we were talking about marriage. Because it surprised him at that point. Richard and I had been married, 40-something years, 44, I think, or 40, 43. And I happened to mention that, I'm the family bookkeeper, I'm the family banker. I manage the checking, all the money. That's mine. And he looked at me, and the first words he said were, "I would never trust a Ugandan woman with my money." And my immediate reflexive response was, why would you marry somebody you don't trust? Job one. If you don't trust a woman with your money, why would you even think of marrying?
Yes, that's it.
But yet, so that was my introduction. And then I go to some of the seminars that they have for different things, for financial planning, for example. And I hear, and the VC did this in public, so I can repeat this story. He remarked on how, having gone to one of these financial planning seminars, that he realized that his wife didn't know who had title to what land, didn't know all the bank account numbers, didn't, and if he got injured or died suddenly, she'd be unaware of the resources available to her, which makes her subject to abuse by outsiders. And how would she take care of the family? Because they have a son at home. So, and I hear that and I'm thinking, I know you hear about Americans who he hides his financial thing, or they pool certain things and keep other things separate. That's fine. But not telling your wife you own 35 hectares someplace. And that's normal.
Yeah.
That's, in the States, we don't encourage that. There are occasions, when there's a disparity between the financial resources of one party versus the other. That's where prenups come in. But prenups also disclose assets. And states, the individual states have very strict rules about what property the spouses can claim. And each state is a bit different. Some follow the English model, some follow the continental model, the French and Spanish model. But generally, people know if you have an equal relationship, maybe, and I was a stay-at-home spouse. My joke is I've been a missionary my whole life. Richard was my source of support. And now I'm a formal missionary with a sending agency. But I knew how much he made. We had a budget. His paycheck went into a joint account. And, when we bought life insurance, we were transparent about who was entitled to, who was the beneficiary on the policy. And now I manage all of that. Now, some people, I had law school classmates who, would set a budget, and then they had a joint account for their mutual expenses, and then they each had separate accounts. That was money they could spend without the other person saying, "What are you doing with that?" You have a joint saving. You agree what your goals are, but you share a lot, much more than I hear here. And there's no one, like here, maybe the man is responsible for school food, and maybe if the wife has some income, she makes sure there's food in the house.
Yeah.
And those are cultural. And they don't necessarily share how much they're bringing in, so long as the fees are paid and dinner is served. The rest of it, you don't have to answer for. Which is how people pay for side checks. It's how wives, might buy their own assets and lead a separate life that may not include another man, or may include an occasional other man. It just, it's not a true sharing. When you're coming together and you're having a family, then you should be modeling care and concern fully, not, I've done my part, get out of my face. And that works on both sides. But I think in a Christian marriage, you need to be transparent with one another.
Yes.
Here's what I make. Here's what he makes. Here's how much goes into the account. We agree, pays for the school fees, pays for food, pays for housing, pays for utilities, whatever it is, and whatever we budget. Here's how much we agree to save for vacation every year, or to provide mabugo or transport to, my cousin's wedding or my uncle's funeral. All of that is transparent, and maybe there's a little bit left for clothes. But you play soccer, you travel, whatever. But it's transparent.
Transparency should be the key.
Yeah, and you
to marriage.
Yes, that level of transparency, however you choose to divide your financial responsibilities, transparency, I think, is key.
Yes.
So that a woman can trust that there's no side check.
Yes.
And the man can trust that there's no
another man behind
another man behind her.
Yes.
Where are you spending your time? Because the other thing is that demands is a willingness. You're married, but you don't need to control everything that other person does. Yes, you're accountable. If you're people need to be honest about their use of time. They need to be calm when they're frustrated by things. Like 4 nights this week, instead of coming home at 7, you've been home at 9. It's not a jam. Where have you been? What's happening? And that deserves an honest answer. So yeah, just transparency and accountability about everything. Not because you want to control, not because you want to dictate what someone does with their time, but that we have made a commitment to each other, and part of building a life is being honest. And being able to trust one another, because Richard and I lived apart on several occasions because he got a job there and I had things to finish here. And I trusted him enough that it didn't even occur to me. Sometimes a couple times, people who were friends where I was left behind and said, you trust him? Are you sure he's not spending time with another woman? I said, I would do that. He wouldn't. I know him. He wouldn't. I trusted him enough to say, yes, go take this job. Yes, I will join you later. And yes, I know you won't betray our vows. I trusted him. Forsaking all others. If I ever learned you did, I don't know how I would respond, because it just never would occur to me. And it didn't occur to him that I would share my faith with my neighbor while he was gone. That didn't happen. And it never, we were able to, endure these separations for whatever reason, because I was in graduate school, because I wasn't going back to Alaska in the winter. Whatever, school, Owen's school, let him finish this piece of it. But it was fine because we trusted each other.
Trust was the key to your marriage. Oh, that's interesting, Auntie. Yeah, so interesting. For a person to have a healthy marriage, you should know how to trust your partner. You should learn how to trust your partner. Trust is the key. And you shouldn't be equally yoked with a non-believer. You shouldn't be equally yoked. The two can't work together.
The third thing I would add is you should be a trustworthy person. It's not that I should trust someone
Who doesn't trust you.
who's lied to me. And that was a challenging lesson to, and that's a challenging lesson to teach kids, because they don't like being in trouble. They'll tell little white lies, they'll tell bigger lies. It's like, I have to be able to trust you. People have to be able to trust you. That was a lesson that was reinforced when I was growing up. It was an important value in my father's family, and in the way he was raised and the way he was trained in the military. If you're told to be there at 9 o'clock, be there at 9 o'clock. Right? Because sometimes the lives of 10 other people hang on you being there at 9 o'clock. Whatever the battle plan is. So trust was very, very, and your word was who you were. If you couldn't be trusted, how could you expect to be employed? How could you expect to be married? How could you expect to be all kinds of things? So you have to, in addition to trusting your partner has to be a trustworthy person.
Okay, thank you so much. And Auntie, a lot of girls out there, they want to get married. They are eagerly want to enter marriage. What advice would you give to a person who wants to enter marriage? Because we see you entered marriage at the age of 22 and you're still married 47 years. That's the most interesting part. That's why you're the person we were looking for in this.
A couple of things. And my life didn't work out this way. I wound up, as I said, I was a missionary, and Richard was my sort of source of support, because when I wasn't taking care of Owen in the house, I had outside service activities that I was engaged in, and they were quite extensive. But I would encourage you, one, to develop, even if you're, whether you finished whatever level of schooling you've finished, find work that is honest and then doesn't require you to compromise your own values, and stick with it. Have your own network of friends, because we can trust each other. He has good friends, and he tells me who they are. If they're work friends, he tells me how he met them. He tells me where they, when he encounters them, and some of them are women that were colleagues that he stays in touch with, and he's very transparent about, I heard from Sally and she's doing this, so I know what Sally's doing, and I know how Sally fits into his life, and her story is interesting. So you can have friendships. Most of his close friendships are obviously with men. And that's okay too. And I don't insert myself into them. I don't even insert myself into his relationship with our son. If they're having a conversation, I'll ask if I can join. Because Owen and I have our own relationship. And it's different because I'm his mother and Richard is his father. So, build your own skill set. Have a job, whatever it is. We were made for work, and honest employment is good. All right, and just know that, so that you can be somewhat independent until you reach a point where you have small children to take care of. But maybe you have your own source of money. You also have something to fall back on. Your spouse can get hurt. This is a dangerous place to be on the road. All kinds of things can happen. So if you have a skill and a background in something, that is something you can go back to if you need to, for whatever reason. Also, particularly if you're a Christian, you should have, your own, say, Bible study. It might be with other women because same-sex Bible studies, same-gender Bible studies are fine.
Yes.
I mean, they help feed you. They're places where you can sort of vent. You don't want to complain too much and only focus on complaining, but those kinds of things, have those outlets. Keep them. And the same is true for your spouse. If your husband should have a Bible study. If you're in the Anglican tradition, there's Mother's Union, there's Father's Union. There are groups like Men of Purpose. There are places where men can have role models if you're not living near parents or your parents didn't set a good role model. So stay in touch. Getting married doesn't mean you turn in on yourself. Getting married means you're growing, and you have this person you're accountable to, and you may have this little person you're responsible for, but you are still, you're still Brenda. You are still Catherine, and Brenda needs feeding, and so does Catherine. So keep your friends, keep your skills up, whatever works with your life situation. Maybe you learn a new skill, but do that. But the important thing about having a job before you find a husband is that you don't need a husband to take care of yourself. All right? You're getting married not because you want to be cared for, not because you want to be dependent like you are on your parents. Why would you want to be dependent like you are on your parents? But because you want to share your life with somebody, and somebody wants to share his life with you. You have found someone who shares your values, who shares some of your same interests, whether it's Japanese anime or fishing or long walks in nature. Whatever it is, something you share. You spend time together, and you enjoy each other's company, and you can see yourselves together 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
You have to be able to envision, I still want to be excited about this person 20 years from now. I want to know this person has my back if I am unfairly attacked, that they will defend me. They will not say, you asked for that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, too bad for you. But they are your person, and you are theirs. You're not just legally sharing a bed and legally producing children, otherwise lead separate lives. And you can see those, you see those TikTok videos with the older men who are all of a sudden alone because they've grown apart from their spouse. They worked very hard. They put their kids through school. But they had a relationship in the end with the spouse or the kids, and everybody's like, I don't care about you as a human being. And that's part of a family, is that you care for each other as people. That is, God made us to be in community. And a family is part of a bigger community. The family is also a community, and if you don't have a relationship with the people in your family, and there's not a good reason for that, it's one thing if they're an addict or there's abusive because of a psychological problem. I recognize sometimes you have to cut people off, but you should be entering a marriage with the idea that this person's going to excite me 20 years. I can see we're still going to have fun 20 years from now, 30 years from now. We got to connect. And when I see him across the room, I'm happy I'm going home. So that's what you're looking for, and if you haven't found it, you support yourself. Because then, when you are able to support yourself, you have choices. You don't have to settle for someone for whom, you're just the next pretty face. Someone who's what you want, someone who's going to make a commitment to you and to the children you have.
Thank you so much, Catherine. For me, I'm really blessed with her words, her journey, and everything she has said. I really loved that, Auntie. Thank you so much. I'm blessed with your words, with everything you have shared with us today. And to my viewers, thank you so much for watching. And I humbly request you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. May God bless you. Bye-bye.